All right, the session is now being recorded, and again, we have Kyleigh Edwards and Diana Bailey from the Lawrence County Public School District in Lawrence, Kansas, talking to us about the stigma of leaving the classroom and how we can avoid that.
Do educators really mean all their students when they say they're meeting all students' needs? Are students with differing intellectual abilities or exceptionalities having their educational needs met on a daily basis and an individualized level? Today we're here to share how you can lose the stigma of leaving the classroom through co-teaching, all the while personalizing learning in a blended environment. Welcome to the final session in today's 6th Annual Global Accessibility Awareness event. Hi, my name is Diana Bailey, and I've been teaching for 13 years. Over the last 4, I have created a personalized learning environment for my students to excel. My journey with this innovative way to reach all children began when my principal asked me if I wanted to read a book about flipped learning. I was pretty reluctant until I saw it was only 78 pages, and I thought, whoa, my kind of book, short and sweet. I was enthralled with what I read about filming some of my lessons and basically multiplying myself by 10 in the classroom or giving kids access from anywhere to my teaching. I can do this by sending the videos home, embedding them in a learning management system, or other ways. I'm often better at talking in front of 11-year-olds. I'm a little nervous right now, than instead of in front of a global community. But I'm really excited to be here today and hope you will hear my passion for education as we share our incredible story and journey.
My name's Kyleigh Edwards. I'm currently finishing my 3rd year as a special education teacher here in Lawrence, Kansas. Before this, I was a paraeducator for 2 school years, and all of my post-graduation experience has been within the same school building. I've worked with students on every end of all of the spectrums that we know of, and I've also seen the gradual change from traditional to personalized learning, and I've had the privilege of being a part of the changing forefront with Diana.
We also would like you to see a little of the demographics that make up our school district. Lawrence, Kansas is a college town located in the heart of America. This predominantly liberal community often takes the lead in innovative ideas and practices. As we tell our story, you will begin to understand that this is a huge reason we have had the support to try and ultimately succeed at thinking outside the box to educate all of our students equally. As you look at the numbers off to the right of the slide, you can see we have a 39% students receiving free and reduced lunch. The percentage of students with exceptionalities is about 1,400, and the multitude of languages spoken here you can see are 25. I feel like this really demonstrates the diversity of our school district.
Diana and I started noticing a lot of issues that we wanted to solve. And for me, it started with the most basic concept of just pulling students out for group. Sometimes when I walk into the room to get students, their shoulders slump over, they roll their eyes at me, and they ask me, do I really have to go to group? Beyond them not being excited to come and me feeling defeated before we even began, I had to interrupt what they were currently engaged in, which created choppy instruction between their classroom and my resource room. With the transition comes lost instructional time between moving spaces and using motivation strategies to get kids to want to come to group and to actually participate. I also noticed a divide between what I was doing and what the general education teachers were doing, and a question came up about who was really responsible for these kids. And I would often get questions like, when are you coming to get your kids? Or one of your kids was misbehaving today. And most frequently I would hear, what are we going to do about your kids? It all felt like a tricky combination of limbo and tug of war for these kids.
Frustration. That's what I would feel as the students would come and go. At this time, I was still that sage on the stage, spoon feeding my students at a set pace, basically holding all the information hostage until I was ready to give it out. I was the queen of the room. I felt the need to control all of it. So when one or more of our students were taken out to get help or enrichment, I would know that in 30 to 60 minutes, I would have to stop whatever I was doing and catch them up. Or worse, ignore the students until I could get to a stopping point. This was nonsense, of course. But it was at these times that I began to feel like, well, hey, they're your kids, so you deal with them. And I'm super embarrassed about sharing this part of our story. But fortunately, Kyleigh and I started to brainstorm and began to think, what engagement do these students really have just waiting to be pulled out? Or what anxiety would they feel re-entering the room? Imagine their frustration of not knowing what point we were in the lesson, or worse, what did they miss? Imagine the social and emotional turmoil this can cause in students that are leaving the classroom. These students weren't the only ones I was missing, however, because we weren't personalizing the curriculum for all of our students. At this time, I remember coming home just defeated, knowing I had missed helping certain students or unintentionally making them feel like they were not part of the class or that they were unimportant altogether.
There's also something to be said about what our environment looked like. What we think is fascinating about these two pictures is that the one on the left was taken in the early 1900s, and the one on the right we still see in some classrooms today. This factory model is destroying our students' engagement and self-esteem, and it's also minimalizing students' abilities by creating a one-size-fits-all type of education. From a special education perspective, this setup is a nightmare. Imagine all eyes on you as every student looks up from their silent working time to see who's leaving the room and who they're leaving with. What's even worse is when the teacher, who's standing at the front of the classroom with all attention on her, announces that it's time for you to go and you need to clean up your stuff before you do.
Sometimes as teachers, we think putting all the kids that are being pulled at the same table or same row would be easy. It seemed like it would be less of a distraction as they left. But ultimately, this caused a bigger stigma than when they could be anywhere throughout the room. If you notice the picture on the last two slides, they don't look like any environment we as adults would want to be a part of. Yet we're consistently providing these spaces for students to learn, and we continually repeat these practices each year that embarrass the students.
So we knew what needed to change, but what were some of the things we had to do to make it happen? First, we have to mention that we're extremely lucky because we had district support of personalized learning in a blended environment. But we as educators had to make a paradigm shift in our thinking. We had to not only change the way we thought of the physical space in the room, but also about the learning environment. We needed to be flexible, we needed to be willing to have epic fails, and we needed to put in some time for collaboration with other educators. We rethought best practices for special education students and what that truly meant. We shared ownership of the fails and successes, and we gave up being the one in charge.
We became architects of our students' learning. Kyleigh and I began to meet with parents as early as August to discover our students' strengths, weaknesses, and hobbies. We would collaborate and design lessons surrounding their needs. We would incorporate these into our daily lessons, ultimately designing a personal course of academia for each and every student. We were not general education versus special education, fighting for time with our students, trying to reach our own personal teacher goals. Instead, we became a team working toward a shared goal with our students' best interest in mind. This didn't come easy. We had to change our mindset from fix to growth and truly believe in our own power of yet. We had to be flexible and willing to change whole lessons and ideas in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, or even scrap a whole year of lesson plans to try something new to meet the needs of our students. One of my biggest paradigm shifts was with the physical environment. You're gonna love this part. I used to have 2 whole desks, a small fiefdom, if you will, and my walls were plastered with memorabilia of rugby in college, my favorite books, and poster after poster after poster of just stuff. Finally, a mentor of mine came in one day and asked the simplest of questions. What student learning is happening here, Diana? First, she pointed to my desk. Now remember, I have two, not just one, and they weren't small. I had built the 6-foot one myself the first year of teaching. As she waited for my answer, I felt like I was going to cry. I was emotionally attached to these things, but they were just things. And after a few days of reflection, I began to throw things out. I realized all the stuff I had on the wall could be distractions for many of my kids. This is when I first felt that my mindset really changed for the better. I was finally putting the students first. In 2013, as my classroom became a pilot for blended and personalized learning, I received a lot of technology. I went from 2 desktops to 12 devices. I had 5 laptops, 5 iPads, 2 mini Macs with 32-inch TV screens for collaboration, a projector system with an Apple TV. I even received several MacBook carts to check out with 15 devices each. This is when the access for all my students really started to transform. As we began to discuss what to change to make the classroom a better learning environment, we realized that it was not just about the technology, however, but about the mindset, physical space, and the idea that all students can learn. As you can see from the middle picture, the physical space changed from desks to tables. I cleared off the walls and shelves of items not needed, and my vast personal space in which I was occupying disappeared. I started to allow students to learn at their own pace through Blackboard and their adaptive release component. I made more videos, found multiple resources and applications that would assist all of my students. The technologies enabled me to increase my students' access to my curriculum, no matter where they were in the building, in Lawrence, in the state of Kansas, or even in the country. It was actually this year that one of our students was experiencing seizures and needed to be at a hospital for extended periods of time. She'd be out of the state for 2 to 4 weeks. However, she could still log into Blackboard and access both of her teachers, as well as the various content we were covering in class. She also FaceTimed with us during parts of class to collaborate in real time. Her parents describe how these visits went from difficult and somewhat depressing to being interactive and fun. She was able to keep up with her peers and even talk with them weekly. Her confidence soared.
In this first year of blended learning, we shared students who had a single reading goal to an entirely modified curriculum. And they had anywhere from 30 minutes of support in a day to one student who had one-on-one support with an entirely separate setting for the whole day. Every student that we shared accessed technology, peers, and their general education curriculum in some way. We know it's a touchy topic, but when we have students who spend their day in a separate setting, they're often no longer seen as students who participate in their general education classroom. That was not the case for the student that we shared. Anytime he was able to, he spent time in class, and his peers supported him while he was there. He also completed modified versions of all of the 5th grade curriculum with the support of Blackboard, and he even participated in group projects in that way. He was not just my student, because Diana was still acting as his general education teacher, and she even frequently spent time with this student one-on-one in the resource room while I spent time in her classroom.
At the end of that first year, we realized something else needed to happen. So the second year, we decided to go all in, taking a huge risk by putting the majority of the special education students in my classroom. I had 8 students who ranged in abilities from kindergarten to 11th grade. We wanted to have Kyleigh consistently come into the classroom instead of pulling kids out. In addition, gifted students from the other 2 5th grade classes were pushed into my classroom for math. Because I already had 2 gifted students and had built out content in Blackboard for them. As a team, we felt the students would benefit from being with their peers during the time to challenge each other. Also that year, I completely tossed out my traditional classroom rotations in reading. This was pretty insane, considering it was an evaluation cycle that year. And we knew that on the day of observations, we may or may not be having success. Fortunately, I had Kyleigh, and we began to organize and plan how best to push in with our 8 students. We look forward to sharing more about this particular part of our journey the last week in July at Blackboard World Live from New Orleans.
In a time of ever-growing class sizes, we sometimes feel like we're in an all-hands-on-deck type of situation. I've personally worked with every student in Diana's classroom over the past 3 years, whether they have an IEP or not. When students struggle in our classroom, it's not an oh no situation, it's more of a how can we meet their needs situation. I have the ability to pull any student into my push-in groups if they have deficits in the area that I'm intervening in. I also have the ability to allow the students with IEPs to be successful when they can and support others when they need it. I'm not viewed as the teacher who helps only certain kids in this classroom, which helps decrease the SPED stigma.
Fast forward a few years, and you can see what we've accomplished in this photo. We're going to pose a few questions for you to think about while we look at it.
Can you pick out the students who receive academic support in this picture?
What about the students who are receiving enrichment?
Can you tell which student just moved in 2 days before we took this picture?
Imagine when a new student arrives in your class, what little time a teacher has who's up in the front of the classroom to get to know them and show them the ropes. I was able to meet one-on-one with a student for an hour the first day she was there and really get to know her. Who are the introverts and extroverts in this picture? You would be very surprised if I maybe pointed them out to you.
Can you tell who's working on a lower level text?
What students are on social media?
As you can see, we've completely reimagined education through personalized learning and giving access to all of our students. Obviously, there are challenges that come with everything. Some of the major ones for me are scheduling. I still work with students in other classrooms and one who's in a separate setting. In an ideal world, I'd just support one classroom and be able to truly co-teach for the day, but that's not the case. It's also tough to find time to devote to planning. We already mentioned mindset, but getting other colleagues to buy into what we're doing hasn't been entirely successful, and I still have to figure out how to meet the needs of students in classrooms that function differently than what we've described. As far as my students go, it comes as no surprise that it takes a lot of work to get them to be independent, with the new structure and the use of technology in general.
As Kyleigh mentioned, time is the most challenging. In order to personalize learning and best reach our students, we have to reorganize each year to some extent. Of course, we store the bones of our curriculum in Blackboard, but we have 30 new students every year with new personalities, a multitude of needs, varying family lives, and amazing hopes and dreams they wish to achieve. We want to take all of that into consideration. We actually just began organizing for this fall after Transition Day last week. We'll continue to meet and plan throughout the summer. Yes, our treasured summer, we will still meet. But the payoff during the 9 months of school is huge, and you'll hear about it later. Another challenge I mentioned earlier is that other colleagues want you to take their students, and it's tough because you've planned and have the resources, but it also increases your class size, and that's kind of what we've been battling. And if you're an educator, you know what comes with more students: additional paperwork. Finally, having your administrators on board is a major asset. Our school principal is forward-thinking and totally on board with innovative thought. Other schools and districts often struggle due to their administrators having a more rigid idea about what the classroom structure should look like and sound like, in addition to wanting uniformity throughout the building. Our principal supports us with our individualized approach because she doesn't look for students sitting quietly. She looks for students who are engaged in learning with positive mindsets, which is usually pretty noisy. Kyleigh and I like to think of ourselves as modeling the change we want to see happening in the world.
I spoke a minute ago about getting students to use technology independently, but here's one of the many reasons why it's worth it. Often our students struggle to demonstrate their learning and engage in tasks that they think are going to be too difficult for them. Over these last few years, we have realized that choice has created vast accessibility for our students. We've watched nonverbal students and students with anxiety disorders present to the class through iMovie or StoryKit, and we've seen them interact spontaneously with their peers by picking up their cell phone and showing them photos or videos of the cool thing that they did that weekend. We've watched students who can't write a single sentence independently write entire paragraphs with CoWriter. And those who can't read either have picked up Dragon Dictation. We've watched students who want to look like their peers do just that by uploading leveled content into Blackboard. And one of the coolest things we've seen is students switch from saying no to, can I do it a different way?
As you can see, we worked really hard to find different resources to personalize. And this is our goosebump moment, our happy dance time. Of course, we had challenges, but none of that matters on those days or moments when we received a smile of success, a high five, or an entire classroom ovation for a student that had previously been struggling. Several moments come to mind that I can share with you. One would be when a student ran up to me because they had completed a typed paper for the first time using Dragon Dictation and they wanted to show it off. Or the time every student, even my nonverbal student, could participate in the grade level Wax Museum presentation because of the Story Creator or iMovie. Another favorite, and sometimes a little scary, is the moment when no one in the class needed us. They were collaborating, helping each other, and engaged with content. Now, you may think that Kyleigh and I have become so good that technology would take over our jobs and they would become obsolete. But no, now our time just looks different, and these stolen moments allow us time. Remember how I said it takes time? Remember how I said it would pay you back? Well, these moments when we are not needed, we can now focus on creating more awesomeness for our students in Blackboard, or plan a new unit, or even pull up to a student and sit with them and watch what they're working on.
Here's what this looks and sounds like from our students' perspective. The kids put it pretty simply. When a student said that he would have gotten embarrassed, he was expressing a need that we could have easily overlooked. What we saw was a student who refused to do what we asked until we got down to the reason that he didn't want to do it. It was as simple as adding choice. Why did we need it to be done our way anyway? Why can't kids have some say? And why can't we be sensitive to their individual needs? The easy answer is that they can, and so can we.
By eliminating the great divide, as we have commonly called it as we created this presentation, we take the fear out of school. We change the I can't to will you help me? And make it an I can moment.
Here are some thoughts from our school community. A parent said, "This environment was great for my student. He could feel like he wasn't the only one who needed to move throughout the day. He didn't stick out for that reason anymore. And when you're working with peers on things, you get different perspectives. You see a different way to learn something other than just what the teacher says."
A mental health and leadership team member and a parent from Deerfield said the following: "This allows educators and students to be more innovative in their work. It's based more on individual student need and allows for curriculum to be more student focused. A blended learning environment combined with excellent teachers appears to decrease avoidance behaviors that lead to office visits. There have also been fewer mental health team referrals from this setting because of the teacher's ability to make meaningful relationships with all of their students and meet their needs within the classroom." So one last look into our classroom. Where is the front of this room? If I hadn't labeled it, could you tell where the teachers are in this room? Notice the engagement and collaboration. Identify the students that have chosen to not even use technology. And lastly, we're not a one-to-one school. I really wish there was a video here so you could hear the gentle hum of an engaged, personalized classroom. It's truly mesmerizing. We hope you enjoyed a quick peek into our corner of the world. We invite you to tune in the last week in July at BB World Live in New Orleans for our full presentation. We'll be sharing even more stories and strategies that have made us successful. In addition, our attendees will leave the session with valuable ways in which they can utilize Blackboard and other technologies to support an inclusive and personalized learning environment. Finally, you can follow us on Twitter and the hashtag #DianeKai_personalized or 5th grade rocks. We thank you and we welcome any questions you have for us at this time.
I also want to encourage everyone to attend BB World in New Orleans. We have a full session track dedicated to accessibility. And if you go on to the BB World website, you can filter by Fostering Inclusive Education to see all of the accessibility sessions available this year. We've extended our early bird pricing to May 19th, which is tomorrow. So register today to get your discount. And again, are there any additional questions? Thank you again for joining our final Global Accessibility Awareness Day session for 2017. We'll continue this conversation with you through email. Look for invitations to view this session and other sessions. They've all been recorded, and some additional resources that Blackboard has. And you can check out some of that at blackboard.com/accessibility.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all very much.